Today we are continuing our journey in Lent, our journey of becoming prepared. And as we prepare, sometimes we get new toys and new things that we get involved in. And this week, I found a new toy online, and my wife also found a new toy online. My new toy is now Tangle, which is out there and some people will be watching this on Tangle. It is an opportunity for ministries to put out videos and music and design spaces where people can come and see what is going on, and people can get it for themselves as well. It's kind of like MySpace or Facebook, but Christ-oriented. Everything is filtered in that way. And so we for a year, we've had people watching sermons, a dozen or so people watching sermons on YouTube. And I just posted last week's sermon on Tangle, and already we had 30 views on it right away, which was pretty exciting. Now for those who are watching on YouTube and on Tangle, it is very important to remember that YouTube and Tangle and virtual reality does not equal going to church, not equal that fellowship that you get. For all of you who are here, it's wonderful to see you here, to see you in person, and to have this opportunity to worship together. Now, the book that we always go through every week and reflect on is the book of Psalms. And today I'm going to talk briefly about Psalm chapter 27, because this really is where we started. Remember, we started with our preview for this series on preparedness, on getting that idea that everything that we do through this time of Lent is we're preparing ourselves to do hard things. Preparing ourselves for the challenges that God has for us. We don't simply go through this time of depriving ourselves of something, taking on a discipline of taking something on or giving something up just for our own benefit. It's for God's benefit and for what He wants us to do with that. What He wants us to learn, how He wants us to grow, and who He wants us to impact in the world. We are instruments for Him in this dedication. David was great in this, and his desire should reflect our desire. Verse 4 says, "One thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple." That is His desire, and that should be our desire as well. To step into the courts and to be able to seek God, to dwell in His house. David says elsewhere, "I would rather stand at the door of your tent, Lord, than to dwell in the tents of the unrighteous." This desire is what we have. And the thing is this desire he had, there's this barrier that sits between man and God that we'll be looking at briefly in the book of Romans. And that's that barrier of sin. Because God cannot stand sin in His presence. And so the goal that we go after and we want to know about is how to become righteous so we can stand before God. What can we do to be able to do that? And that's the question that was asked and still is asked today. What do we do to make ourselves worthy to be able to stand before the Father? What task is He going to give me, and how do I go about that? Now, one other thing that I talked about before in this section, and that, remember back when we started, Elijah in the clefts of the rock asking for God's help, seeking out God, and David as well, saying, "Do not hide your face from me. Let me know what it is you want me to do, and I will do it." But what often happens to us is we get tired of waiting, don't we? We don't want to wait to hear what God wants us to do. We want to do it now. And the thing that happens is, when we try to do it on our own, we try to do it now, we try to do it in our own way, is the second question in the sermon notes, it creates what's known as fundamental atheism. Because we're no longer trusting in God. When we try to do it simply on our own and not wait for Him and not seek His face, we're not living out our faith. we're living no different from the guy across the street who doesn't think God exists. Instead, we need to be earnestly seeking God's face and asking him, what is it that you want me to do? And how is it, maybe a better question, is it that you want me to live? Romans chapter 3. Now, transition statement here. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. Paul is addressing an interesting group of people. He's talking to the church scattered throughout a region. We use this as our theme book as we studied my first year here in 2005 and 2006, talking about identity. What is our identity? Who do we find that in, and how do we express it? In this chapter, we see that we all, whether we had a background of growing up in the church, or whether we had a background of not growing up in the church, that we all are all held accountable to God. We all, no matter what background we've had, we have the same opportunity to come before him. Paul is using here imagery of a court case, of, as C.S. Lewis calls it, being in the docks. Being in the docks and sitting there in the court, and one thing that happens is the whole world is silenced. That comes from the idea that in a Roman court, you could be literally slapped across the face and no longer be able to speak in the court. You would be silenced.